What if I told you that Hollywood's greatest action heroes have nothing on the real-life African resistance fighters who took on entire colonial empires and actually won? While movie studios spend millions creating fictional heroes who fight impossible odds, African history is packed with real warriors whose stories are so epic they make Marvel plots look boring. These weren't just brave individuals, they were tactical geniuses who used everything from guerrilla warfare to diplomatic brilliance to psychological operations that would make Navy SEALs jealous. From Samurai Touré's decade-long cat-and-mouse game with French forces to Ethiopia's stunning victory at Adwa that sent shockwaves across Europe, African resistance movements combined the strategy of chess grandmasters with the grit of action movie protagonists. Let's dive into the most cinematic resistance campaigns in African history and discover why these real-life heroes deserve their own blockbuster franchises. Picture this: one man with a small army holding off the entire French military machine for nearly 2 decades, disappearing into forests like a ghost and reappearing where least expected to strike devastating blows. Samurai Touré's resistance campaign from 1882 to 1898 reads like the ultimate action thriller. The French Empire expected to steamroll through Samurai's Wassoulou Empire in months. Instead, they got trapped in the longest and most expensive colonial war in African history. Samurai's first masterstroke was recognizing he couldn't fight the French using conventional tactics. While other African leaders tried to meet European armies directly, samurai studied French military doctrine and realized their weakness. They were designed for European warfare, not African conditions. So he invented African guerrilla warfare. His mobility strategy was pure genius. Samurai created a portable empire. His entire population could pack up and relocate within days, taking livestock, equipment, and even dismantled buildings. When French forces arrived expecting to capture cities, they found empty settlements and scorched earth. Meanwhile, Samurai's forces would already be setting up somewhere else, using local terrain knowledge to stay one step ahead. The psychological warfare was next level. Samurai would appear to retreat, drawing French forces deeper into unfamiliar territory, then strike from multiple directions simultaneously. His intelligence network was so sophisticated that he often knew French battle plans before French soldiers in the field did. Samurai's logistics operation would impress modern military strategists. He established weapons workshops, created supply lines across hundreds of miles, and maintained diplomatic relationships that kept him supplied with modern weapons. The man was running a military-industrial complex from the West African savannah. The end came through sheer exhaustion. After 16 years of constant warfare, Samurai was finally captured in 1898. But it took the combined forces of France and Britain, plus African allies turned against him, to bring down one man and his guerrilla army. The Battle of Adwa in 1896 wasn't just a military victory. It was the action movie climax where the underdog hero delivers the knockout punch that nobody saw coming. Italy walked into Ethiopia expecting an easy colonial conquest. They had better weapons, European military training, and racist confidence that African armies couldn't match European prowess. What they got instead was one of the most spectacular military defeats in European colonial history. Emperor Menelik II's preparation reads like a masterclass in strategic planning. While Italy made colonial plans, Menelik quietly built the largest, best-equipped army in African history. He used diplomacy to secure modern weapons from Italy's European rivals, played different Italian factions against each other, and created a military supply chain supporting over 100,000 troops. The intelligence operation was worthy of a spy thriller. Menelik's agents infiltrated Italian colonial administration, intercepted communications, and fed false information that led Italians to dramatically underestimate Ethiopian capabilities. By the time Italian forces realized what they faced, they were surrounded by an army twice their size, equipped with modern rifles and artillery. The battle itself was a tactical masterpiece combining traditional Ethiopian warfare with modern military technology. Menelik used Ethiopia's mountainous terrain to channelize Italian forces into killing zones, then employed pincer movements that would be studied in military academies for decades. But the real genius was psychological. Menelik didn't just want to win, he wanted to send a message that would echo across Africa and Europe. The Ethiopian army deliberately captured Italian officers alive, treated them well, and sent them home to tell the story of African military prowess. The international impact was devastating for European colonial confidence. News of Italy's defeat at Adwa inspired resistance movements across Africa, while forcing European powers to acknowledge that African armies could defeat European forces in conventional warfare. The Mau Mau uprising wasn't just a resistance movement, it was a graduate course in unconventional warfare that influenced liberation movements worldwide. Starting in the early 1950s, Kikuyu freedom fighters developed tactics later studied by revolutionary movements from Vietnam to Nicaragua. They faced the British Empire at peak military strength, backed by modern aircraft, armored vehicles, and unlimited resources. Their response was to create a guerrilla movement so effective it forced Britain to completely abandon its colonial model in Kenya. The forest fighter strategy was pure tactical innovation. Mau Mau forces transformed Kenya's Aberdare Mountains and Mount Kenya forests into impregnable bases that British forces could never fully control. They developed camouflage techniques, underground supply networks, and communication systems, allowing small units to coordinate across vast areas while remaining invisible to British surveillance. The urban resistance network was equally sophisticated. While forest fighters conducted military operations, urban cells gathered intelligence, supplied weapons, and maintained communication networks connecting rural guerrillas with city-based supporters. It was a multi-layered resistance structure that British colonial authorities could never fully penetrate. The psychological operations were designed to undermine British colonial confidence while building African unity. Mau Mau fighters would strike British installations, capture weapons, and disappear before reinforcements arrived. They demonstrated that British military superiority was an illusion, and that African determination could overcome technological advantages. Women played crucial roles that British authorities consistently underestimated. Female fighters served as intelligence operatives, weapons smugglers, and combat leaders while maintaining cover identities as domestic workers or traders. Their access to British homes and offices provided intelligence that male fighters couldn't obtain. The international propaganda campaign was decades ahead of its time. Mau Mau leaders understood their struggle was part of a global anti-colonial movement, working to publicize British atrocities while building international support for Kenyan independence. In 1900, a 60-year-old grandmother looked at British colonial arrogance and decided that sometimes you have to fight even when the odds are impossible. When British colonial governor Frederick Hodgson demanded to sit on the golden stool, the sacred symbol of Ashanti sovereignty, he made the mistake of disrespecting the wrong culture at the wrong time. Ya Asantewa's response was to organize the last major war against British colonization in West Africa. And for months, her forces had the mighty British Empire genuinely worried. The siege of Kumasi Fortress was military tactics worthy of a blockbuster film. Instead of attacking British fortifications directly, Ya Asantewa turned the war into a siege that trapped British forces in their own stronghold. For 3 months, British officials who had come to impose colonial rule found themselves running out of food, ammunition, and dignity, while surrounded by an African army led by a grandmother. The guerrilla warfare tactics were innovative for their time. Ashanti forces used their knowledge of local terrain to appear and disappear like ghosts, striking British patrols and supply lines before melting back into familiar forests. They turned every path into a potential ambush site and every village into a potential intelligence network. The psychological warfare was particularly effective. British forces who had expected to face primitive opposition instead found themselves outmaneuvered by sophisticated military tactics. The fact that their opponents were led by an elderly woman made the situation even more humiliating for colonial authorities who had built their reputation on military superiority. Before European colonization reached its peak, Shaka Zulu was already revolutionizing military tactics in ways that would influence warfare across continents. Shaka's innovations weren't just about fighting, they were about transforming the entire concept of military organization. He took traditional Zulu warfare and engineered a military machine that conquered most of southern Africa within 2 decades. The tactical innovations were groundbreaking. Shaka invented the Horns of the Beast formation that used coordinated attacks from multiple directions to surround and destroy enemy forces. He developed the assegai, a short stabbing spear more effective in close combat than traditional throwing spears. His shield tactics created mobile walls that could advance under enemy fire while protecting attacking warriors. The military discipline was unprecedented in African warfare. Shaka created age-based regiments that lived and trained together, developing unit cohesion that allowed complex tactical maneuvers during battle. His warriors could march faster, fight longer, and coordinate more effectively than any African army of the time. The psychological warfare was designed to break enemy morale before battles began. Zulu war chants, synchronized movements, and fearsome reputation created terror that often caused enemy forces to break and run before serious fighting started. Shaka understood that winning in your enemy's mind was more efficient than winning on the battlefield. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba didn't just resist Portuguese colonization. She turned it into a 30-year masterclass in strategic flexibility that left European forces constantly confused about what they were fighting. Nzinga's genius was adaptability that bordered on the supernatural. When Portuguese forces expected conventional warfare, she went guerrilla. When they adapted to guerrilla tactics, she shifted to diplomacy. When they thought they understood her diplomatic strategy, she changed her entire identity and started fighting as a male warrior king. The identity warfare was psychological operations at the highest level. Nzinga would appear in peace negotiations as a diplomatic queen, then show up on battlefields as a male warrior leader. Portuguese commanders never knew which version of Nzinga they were dealing with, and this uncertainty became her greatest weapon. The alliance building was international strategy decades ahead of its time. Nzinga, allied with Dutch forces against Portuguese colonial expansion, created sanctuary cities for escaped slaves who became her soldiers, and built coalition networks that turned Portuguese colonial subjects into Portuguese enemies. If you enjoyed these epic tales of African resistance fighters who took on colonial empires and won, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more incredible true stories that put fictional action heroes to shame.